Priaulx Rainier was a South African-British composer. Although she lived most of her life in England and died in France, her compositional style was strongly influenced by the African music remembered from her childhood. She never adopted 12-tone or serial techniques, but her music shows a profound understanding of that musical language. She can be credited with the first truly athematic works composed in England. Her cello concerto was premiered by Jacqueline du Priaulx in 1964, and her violin concerto du Canti Finale was premiered by Yehudi Menuhin in 1977. Biography. Priaulx Rainier was born in 1903 in Hoek, Natal, South Africa, to a father of Huguenot descent and an English mother. One of her sisters was a cellist. She studied the violin at the South African College of Music in Cape Town after her family moved there when she was age 10, but moved permanently to London at the age of 17. In 1920, when she took up a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music, she studied with Rasby Wolff and Sir John Blackwood McEwen. She taught at Badminton School, Bristol, and also played violin in a string quartet. She had encouragement as a composer from Arnold Bax, and studied with Nadia Boulanger during 1937 in Paris, but considered herself essentially self-taught. Early career. Priaulx Rainier started composing in 1924, but little came from her pen until 1937, after a long period of recuperation following a serious car accident in 1935. Her first acknowledged work was 3 Greek epigrams for voice and piano. Her first mature work was the string quartet No. 1 in C minor. It was given a private performance in 1940 but not performed publicly until 1944 at the Wigmore Hall. It was recorded in 1949 by the Amadeus Quartet. The music was used for a ballet, Night Spell, performed by the José Limon Company in the USA in 1951 and at Sadler's Wells Ballet in 1957. She often used ostinato-like repetition and alternation in her works, often of a percussive character. These characteristics are apparent in the Viola Sonata and the Barbaric Dance Suite for piano. There is also a suite for clarinet and piano, Una Sinfonia da Camera for strings, and a ballet suite. Her first large-scale work for voices was Orpheus Sonnets for soprano, baritone, chorus and orchestra. In 1939 she was appointed a professor of composition at the RAM, where she remained until 1961. She was elected a fellow in 1952. Her students included Nigel Bartley, Jeremy Dale Roberts, Rachel Cavallo and Christopher Small. She and Michael Tippett co-founded the St. Ives September Festival, first presented in June 1953. Orchestral works. The first of Priaulx Rainier's large orchestral works was Falla Falla, first heard in 1961, celebrating Sir Adrian Bolt's 10th anniversary with the London Philharmonic Orchestra. Peter Pears and the Purcell Singers gave the first performance of Priaulx Rainier's Requiem at the Aldborough Festival that year. It was set to the poem Requiem, written for her in 1938 to 1940 in Paris by David Gascoigne and dedicated to the future victims of war. Pears also commissioned Rainier's Cycle for Declamation and the Bee Oracles, a setting of Edith Sitwell's poem The Beekeeper, scored for tenor, flute, oboe, violin, cello and harpsichord. Pears first sang it publicly at the Aldborough Festival in 1970. The oboe quartet Quanta was commissioned by William Glock, head of music at the BBC, and written for Janet Craxton and the London Oboe Quartet. The title comes from the quantum theory. The cello concerto was written for a prom concert held on the 3rd of September 1964, where it was introduced to the world by Jacqueline du Priaulx and the BBC. Symphony Orchestra under Norman Delmar. It has been claimed that Priaulx loathed every second of the Rainier concerto, not only because of its idiom, but also because it was technically beyond her. Priaulx Rainier's largest work of that period was the orchestral suite Quartet Rainier, a continuous piece in 7 sections, each one descriptive of one of the moon's seas. It was dedicated to Barbara Hepworth, whose acquaintance she made in the summer of 1949 when she stayed in St Ives, Cornwall, using a fisherman's loft as a studio. She remained a close friend of Hepworth and Ben Nicholson. She claimed that only sculptors and architects fully understood her music. Another work premiered at a prom concert was Flomel, an evocation of one of her favorite places, Flomel in the northwest of France, near the mouth of the River Loire. It uses an orchestra of winds and percussion, including timpani, tubular bells, handbells, antique cymbals, high and low gongs, xylophone and marimba. Her violin concerto, Du Canti e Finale, was commissioned by Yehudi Menuhin, who performed it at the 1977 Edinburgh Festival with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra conducted by Sir Charles Groves. Menuhin described Rainier as having a musical imagination of a color and variety scarcely to be believed. On the other hand, after hearing her music, William Walton commented that she must have barbed wire underwear. Concertant for 2 winds and orchestra was written for and dedicated to Janet Craxton and Theo King and was premiered at the Proms in 1981. There have been infrequent performances of Priaulx Rainier's music as they are difficult for both performer and listener. Premieres of her music were not always adequate, reducing the chances of there being further performances. Her complete chamber music was recorded and broadcast by the BBC in 1976. Later life. She was awarded a doctorate in music by the University of Cape Town in June 1982. She was also a passionate gardener and ecologist who helped design and planted the exotic plants in Barbara Hepworth's sculpture garden in St Ives. Her last work, Wildlife Celebration, was commissioned by Yehudi Menuhin and performed in aid of Gerald Durrell's Wildlife Conservation Trust. Priaulx Rainier died on the 10th of October 1986 at Bessy-en-Chandessie in France, aged 83. The date was the 70th birthday of David Gascoigne, the poet to whose words she had written her Requiem of 1956. Legacy. Most of her music manuscripts are now housed at the J.W. Jagger Library at the University of Cape Town. On the 28th of March 1987, a concert in celebration of her life and work was held at Wigmore Hall. A pictorial biography, Come and Listen to the Stars Singing, written by June Doppy, was published in 1988. Her centenary on the 3rd of February 2003 was marked by a special program on Australia's ABC Classic FM. Her Lost Early String Quartet was given its world premiere on the 8th of September 2004 at the Tate St Ives Visual Music Week. Rainier's movement for strings, substantially completed in 1951 but lacking final revision, was edited by Douglas Young and received its first performance at the BBC Proms on the 10th of August 2013.